about honoring our heroes and their achievements with their courage and dedication. And we say thank you for your sacrifices. And our country couldn't be where it is without you. All right. Today is November 11th, 2015, and we are interviewing Colonel George Braun in the theater of McHenry West Campus. Colonel Braun is 73 years old, having been born on November 5th, 1942. My name is Matthew, and I'll be interviewing him along with Jamie, Noah, Larissa, and Hannah. Mr. Fitzgibbons is recording this interview, and my U.S. History class is in the audience. I'm a student at McHenry High School. Colonel, can you state for the recording what war and branch of service you served in?
I certainly will, but right now, first of all, I'm honored to be here, and I'm glad that this high school has taken an interest in the Veterans Day. Veterans Day means a lot to the history of the United States of America. As far as my involvement, I was basically in the Vietnam era, my combat tour, and I was a Marine fighter attack pilot. I flew the F-4 Phantom, and I didn't just wake up one day and get there. It took a while to get there and be trained and so forth and so on. In Vietnam, I flew 240 missions in North and South in Vietnam. Those some were called close air support. Those are the type of bombing mission that you do when your troops are in contact with the enemy, and you want to make sure that our troops are protected and not going to be overrun by the enemy. Other types of missions that I flew were fighter type missions that were basically blocking any attempts from North Vietnam to proceed out towards our carriers based in the Gulf of Tonkin, or on the other side we did B-52 escort when the B-52s did bombing missions along what we call the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which is their supply routes to South Vietnam and the Viet Cong at that time. So basically, the Marine Air is trained in multiple services or types of flying, and that's basically what I'm going to be talking about as far as the combat aspect of this interview.
All right. And what was your rank?
My rank in combat was a captain. You start out as a second lieutenant. Most pilots are commissioned officers, and you start out as a second lieutenant, and then by the time you get into flying combat airplanes, it's first lieutenant or captain and or major from that point on. But I was a captain in Vietnam.
All right. You said you served in Vietnam, right?
Yes.
All right.
My name is Noah. What was your early service and basic training like?
The early service basically includes boot camp and your basic training. In the case of Marines and Army and the ground forces like that, you go to boot camp, and actually all service has what we call a boot camp, and that's your familiarization to the service, to the discipline requirements, and to the basic orientation of how military structure is involved and how it operates on each level. So boot camp, that one is one that will always stick in my mind, because when I flew to Quantico, Virginia, first of all, I signed up right out of high school. This was not because I knew I wanted to be a Marine, but there was a chance, they had a program there for College of Marines, college-bound Marines, where you could basically go to boot camp during the summers, and then you split it up to 2 summers, and you complete boot camp. And during that time, or after that time, before you graduate, you had a chance to, say, quit, go on the draft list, or you could join the reserves, or you could take a commission as a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. So basically, when we went to the boot camp, we learned that we aren't in the individuals. We're team players. And as independent as you wanted to be, the Marine Corps drill sergeants took your independence away, shaved your heads, and we all looked the same. We were from all over different parts of the country and different accents and all this stuff where, our world just instantly got bigger when we went to boot camp. And on the other hand, after we went through the disciplines, and they basically, there was a lot of physical training, and they wanted to put some pressure on you and teach you that you could learn to learn while you're under pressure and under stress. And most of us, when I was in your seats right there, I had no idea I could do the things that they taught me in boot camp, as far as enduring and as far as being a team player. I played sports, but there is nothing like going to boot camp and learning to be part of a platoon or a fire team and enduring the stress and the challenges and succeeding. Then you can compare to like a high school sport or playing the band, any other types of team things that you do here. This steps it up. And to me, that was one of the biggest lessons I learned right off the bat, that I could do a lot more than I thought I could do. So they taught me. When I got the basic training, for me, I ended up passing the test high enough to be selected to do aviation. I never thought I could fly. Anyways, they said, well, you can do this. I remembered asking the sergeant, I said, do you think I could, really think I could fly, Sarge? And he says, you passed the test high enough, but most people who pass it that high can be a pilot. Now, I didn't know what I was going to fly at that time or what I was thinking about flying. In the Marine Corps, they had mostly helicopters or jets. And they had some transport planes too, but that was a small part of it. So basically, we went into that training program and we started getting some background in aviation, and then the basic training, once I graduated from college, at that time the Vietnam War was starting to heat up, so they needed pilots right away. That was February 1965. So they commissioned us and sent us straight to Pensacola, Florida. That's where the Naval Air Training is. And all Marine aviators at that time were actually naval aviators who were trained by the Navy. We can do, it's a Navy system of teaching and flying and everything else, because we learned how to fly off carriers and to do things above and beyond, or just, very specific to the Navy doctrine. So anyways, that kind of training started out, and I got through the basic thing with a T-34, a single engine prop plane, and the instructor stood back and you sat in front, and I took off and flew around and was, got upside down a couple times and said, hey, this is kind of fun. So there's a difference between fun and actually taking on a mission to get much better than just having fun. And so basically, I was selected to go to jets in Meridian, Mississippi. And my first jet instructor was a man called John McCain. Now, he won't remember me, but I'll always remember him. You may know him as a senator, and he still is. And he was also a world-famous prisoner of war. And the reason he was so famous was because his dad was the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet during the time he was a POW. And they used that as leverage for certain negotiations during that time. It's in his book. So anyways, after I did that, I was selected to go to El Toro, California, which is, at that time, I was born in Chicago and then ended up in California. But out there, I was selected I was put in a squadron called FA Crusaders Squadron. And it was VMF, V is a fixed wing, Marine, M, and then F means fighters. And so this was a single seat airplane. And before that, I had never flown anything that had an afterburner on it. And an afterburner is something that when after a jet engine exhausts with gas, they throw more gas back there and you get kind of a controlled explosion on there, and that allows you to go faster than the speed of sound. So the only situation that was unique there is that it was a single-seat airplane. So when you jumped into this airplane, you studied it and you learned all what you're supposed to do with it. They didn't really have any simulator back then. So you just jumped into this airplane and strapped it on, and you launched, and then you hit the throttle, went in the afterburner, and made a big boom, and then, you know, fire came out the tail, and you started going. And then next thing you know, you're airborne, and you know, oh yeah, I got to raise the gear, you know, so you're way behind the airplane already. So anyway, so we went out over the ocean, and wingman, or the instructor was on my wing, and we started doing maneuvers and stuff that was far greater than what we ever done before. And that was scary and exciting, and I wish that someday you can all have this opportunity. As people started deploying out of our squadron to Vietnam, they were deployed individually, and they joined squadrons over there, or they had other billets and so forth. But of the last 3 guys that joined this squadron, I was held back because they were going to bring on this F-4 Phantom, which is a twin-engine afterburning airplane and so forth. And this airplane can go twice the speed of sound. So I did fly from Coronado to San Diego, which is about 100 miles in 3 minutes. So anyways, it does go fast. And this is, and I, you know, the more you are challenged, the more you experience this type of thing, the more you try to raise your limit and get better at it. And all of my squadron mates, you know, all did that. We competed with each other and everything else, but we taught each other. If we learned something, you know, we pass it on to somebody else. And so it's one of those things where it's a great team effort, and that's what we call basic training. And then we got into combat training after that.
Thank you for your service.
Hello, my name is Jamie Woodruff, and I was curious, from your service abroad, what were some of the main memories that you have of your experience?
Main memories primarily is just the camaraderie that you had with your squadron as it was doing these missions, and they changed every day, and each day was a different challenge. And I do remember that on general occasions over there, a lot of the challenges in flying was flying through typhoons and stuff like there, in their fall season there. There was things that we've never done before, and we took off where I couldn't even see to that first row there, and we just saw this line on a runway, but we knew somebody, you know, about 50 miles or 100 miles away needed us, so we did it, and we launched into that. Those were the general observations on that. I do remember several missions. One is in a book that one of my squadron mates wrote, and I just got a copy of it. And that mission itself, we were flying out of Da Nang, and we had to, our airplanes were built like Navy airplanes. You could fold the wings in case you had to land on a carrier and do this sort of stuff. If they can operate off the land or the carrier. We were operating off of Da Nang airfield. And that was a big airfield. There were commercial planes on one side and taking off and landing. Pan Am was flying there, and we were flying combat missions off the other runway. And there are all kinds of different kinds of airplanes out there, including helicopters. So I'll just tell you about this one mission. This one mission, we were on a hot pad. And a hot pad means you were by your airplane right away, and if something critical is happening somewhere, you jumped in the airplane, and then you went airborne. So we got this mission to go. We didn't know what it was, but we jumped in our airplanes, and I was the flight leader, and my buddy, his name was Rick Deledy. We also actually went to San Diego State. Unfortunately, got killed later on, but he and I went out, and so when we went out to the runway, we had, you know, about a half a mile to taxi, but we were doing our checklists and stuff like that, making sure our communications are correct. We checked in with our air control center while we're on the ground and so forth, and we go back to the tower operation, ground to tower, and so they had gotten it. You know, there was an emergency mission or a high priority mission. So we were cleared to take off, except we had a pile of different airplanes in the way of getting to the runway. And we got there, I could see that I could get through these aircraft if I folded my wings. So I just folded my wings, and my wingman, Rick, went and folded his wings, and we maneuvered our way with just something like this, just to get around and get out to the airfield. Now, the most important thing is when you unfold the wings, you got to lock them down, because we don't want the wings to come up. And this is kind of a standard thing to do, but and I recall the communication we were doing at this time. We were talking about 3 different people. I have a radar intercept officer in my back seat, and he doesn't have any flight controls in our particular airplane. And so, but they coordinate all the communications with the controlling frequencies and the controlling authorities. And so I'm listening to them talk, and I'm making sure everything in our airplane is ready to go. And so we get out there, and we're on the takeoff into the runway, and then on the right-hand side, I see Pan Am on the other runway. And across there, the Air Force has an Air Force squadron. They were behind them trying to get ready to do a mission. At that time, by the way, Da Nang was the busiest airport in the world as far as the number of takeoffs and landings. That's a statistic, they use for commercial aviation, but there was that many takeoffs and landings to get that authority. So we got clear. As soon as we got on the runway, we were cleared to go. So we checked our wings down and locked, and then hit afterburner and launched. And we took off in what you call an in formation. So we took off together, and he was not too far away from me, but comfortable. And we launched down the runway, rotated at the same time. You'd think we were the Blue Angels. So anyways, we went out there and we flew around, and our target was only about 50 miles southeast of Da Nang. And the problem with that is we had a full load of fuel, and we had carried these drop tanks. And the drop tanks were full of fuel, and we couldn't pickle the drop tanks. What we wanted to do is make sure that and you couldn't burn all the fuel out of it. So I told my wingman, I said, okay, what we're going to do is go minimum afterburner, and you put your speed brakes out, which is things they're flaps that come out of the side of the airplane to slow you down a little bit, and then we dump fuel, and we were about 6,000 feet, so the fuel was being dumped out, and this stuff vaporizes it and never hits the ground. And so, but we come from the ocean all the way into this target area. Now the target was identified by we call an airborne forward air controller. He's in a very light airplane called a Bird Dog, which is basically like a small Cessna. And he flies around up there, and he sees what's on the ground, and he normally can mark the target down there, and then he says, okay, from my smoke, 10 o'clock, 100 meters or something like that. And that gives us a general idea where we're going to lay our ordnance down. The way our SOP was, our standard operating procedure, the flight leader had forward fire-rated ordnance, and I had 4 19-shot rocket pods that were on my airplane, and he had 6 500-pound bombs, which are called snake eyes because they have a fin that slows down the drag so it doesn't blow up underneath the airplane. And he had, I think, 4 napalm, and that's a firebomb. And so what the air controller found was a North Vietnamese Army regular unit crossing a rice paddy going towards a tree line. And this is a rare situation where because they always move at night, but for some reason they were doing this during the day. And this was a target of opportunity that would, you could really, if we did something to that unit, it would really help that whole area within probably 100 miles around where it's at, because it was a big unit. And so I got in there, and the forward air controller was trying to tell me where it was, and he was out of this smoke that he could fire to point out where the target is. But he pointed out the ridge line, and there was a major mound of dirt that I could see. He says, you got that dirt? And I got it. I said, got it. And so my flight call was Warlock. And that's because I got my wings on Halloween in 1966. But anyway, so we rolled into the target area, and he saw us. As soon as he had visual on us, he says, okay, Warlock, you're cleared in hot. So I came in there, and I was thinking that, well, I could maybe shoot a couple of the rockets and mark the spot for my wingman to come in there and hit, and then I could follow up. The problem was it was a rice paddy, and I figured the rockets, without being this special type of rocket, would just splatter in the mud, and we wouldn't be able to use it. So I decided that I'm going to let them all go. So I came in there and rolled in there, and I launched these rockets, and they all went off at once, and it's like the airplane stopped in midair. But we were still heavy, so I had already told my wingman, I says, when we go in, it's burner in and burner off. Means you use the afterburner in to make sure you don't slow down because we're so heavy and stall in the process, going into the target and off the target. We had to go around, so we had to keep a tight pattern because the enemy was there and they were heading for this wood line, which we wouldn't be able to see. So we basically were on and off that target, and I launched the rockets, and there was a big explosions down there, and he said, "You're right on." So until he cleared, he said, "-2, that's your second airplane. You're in hot." He came in there, dropped his load. He went around twice. I came around the second time, and all I did was make the approach because I figured they'd be ducking, and then they'd stay there, and we get out and around. But anyways, we did that, and we were on and off, and this whole thing took about 20 minutes from the time we took off. And then we came back, and we landed and all this sort of stuff, and when we got to our operations and so forth, we walked in there, and you were talking about the flight and so forth, and then we got an animal. Somebody made a phone call, or Ford Air Control said, "You guys did a really great job," and so forth. And there was an Air Force section of Ford followed us on, so I don't know what really happened to the target, but it was one of the most demanding ops. That's what you're trained to do. You got to be able to all of a sudden change tracks. If you think you're going here, you might be going there, and you got to deal with whether or not you have to do something with the weight of your airplane, or what are the limits to your airplane. You got mountains and also clouds and fog and rain to deal with, and those are the bigger challenges trying to do your mission.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Larissa, and when you came home from the war, how were you received by your family and community?
Well, we lived at that time. I was married and I had 2 daughters, 2 and 4, and they were in California. Mission Viejo was right outside of El Toro Marine Corps Air Base. When we were overseas, a couple of people got newspapers, and during that time there was a big divide in the country because the war appeared to be lasting too long, which, any war is too long, but the thing is, it's one of the things that happens when we have in a society that has freedom of speech and so forth. Basically, a lot of people were getting a lot of media coverage because they were protesting about the Vietnam War. It was lasting too long, and I agree it was. But I didn't feel that while I was there, but when I came back, I did feel that. It wasn't really like people throwing eggs at me or anything, but there were some places in California that did that, and other cities around the country too. But you had to wonder, why is everybody concerned about this? Didn't our president and our Congress and our Senate decide to do this for good reasons and so forth and so on? And actually, years later, I just studied the whole background and everything else, and the reason to go there is absolutely justified. How it was executed is still under question. But the best reward I had was my dad, who was in World War II, and he was kind of a quiet guy. We really didn't have a lot of dialogue. He never talked about World War II or anything like that. When he came home, I came home and I walked in, I saw him for the first time. He gave me the handshake that I'll never forget. I mean, this was really a solid handshake. And, back then it wasn't really, hugging wasn't something that everybody did. Males didn't hug everybody, because it was just a protocol or, I don't know, habit, whatever. But, now, if I say no home, you get a big hug, that sort of stuff. But that handshake meant more to me than anything he could have said. So, as far as my other contemporaries who didn't do this, as a matter of curiosity, nobody really in my environment down in the San Diego area was that divided at that time when we got back, and that was in 69, late 69.
Thank you so much for your service.
Hi, I'm Yasmin and this is Hannah. And our overall question for you is, what one message would you like to leave for future generations who will hear about this interview?
I'm just hoping that, and it's hard to do this, but the message that I would like to leave is that, you know, we still need people who want to serve the country and trust the government to make the decisions they need during that phase of history that we're going through, and it always changes, and there are no perfect worlds, there won't be one. I don't think we're going to ever see one where there's some dictator or some head of government is going to try to take over some other country and so forth and so on. I just hope that everybody in the audience gets motivated just to pay attention to what's going on and pick out who you want to represent this country and be involved in its future. And you can do it with your freedom of speech. You don't have to be in a mob. You don't have to be in a protest group. You can just simply vote or talk on an objective level. Watch television, listen to all of the television channels. You know, this is not something that you really have to be worried about right now because things are going along. There's still a lot of conflict. You got an election coming up. You'll see a lot of the stuff out here. And, you know, you're just going to have to, all I'm saying is I just hope you stay involved. And as whatever you do, you just stay involved and just make sure that you're hearing what you want to hear, or at least is being discussed in a manner that you are used to hearing in a democratic way and with free speech and enjoying the freedoms that you have. By the way, you know, what's the population of the USA right now? Anybody know? It's about 330 million people. And the number of people that are on military service that will wear uniforms is 1/2 of 1% of that number. So you have a very small group of people who have dedicated themselves to do this, and for whatever reason they did it, or they showed up. You know, they did this because they ran out of things to do at home. They got bored, whether they want to go in order to trade or something else that the military can do. But the idea is a very small population is the active military. In the Department of Defense, only 20% of the entire population of the Department of Defense is military people. So there's a perspective here. There's a big organizational support that has to be maintained in order to have this capability. And the rest of the world respects us because we maintain a strong military and technology. We're ahead of the game and all this and that. So I guess that's the message I wanted to leave, is that it was worth it to do it, even though it's been criticized in the past. All wars are going to be criticized in the future, and I don't think they're going to go away unless people show a resolve that they're not going to allow things to go on around the world that's going to screw up the future of the entire world, not less. We've got the most to lose, so that's why we want to stay involved.
Okay, and one last question. How have your experiences in the war changed your view on life?
I think life is more valuable now than I've ever looked at it, because I think, you know, there are things that are worth doing, and there's a lot of things that are worth doing for other people that aren't in a position to do what you ended up doing. And if you can pass that along or motivate somebody down the line that might be considering some government service of some sort, and it doesn't have to be military service, but the idea is I feel grateful that I had a chance. I didn't know I could do half the things I did, or many of them. But, you know, I'm just glad I took the challenge, and I took the challenge of getting better at what I was doing.
Okay, and that's the end of the interview. All of us students and faculty at West Campus want to thank you for your service.
Also, as I sit up here, I'm talking for many, many, many other servicemen in every other service, and a lot of them think the way I do, because they have that background and so forth. So it's not just me I'm talking for, it's a lot of other people.
And are there any students in the audience that want to ask a question?